Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. But at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited everything for just $35 a line. That's $35 a month for unlimited talk, text, and data. Switch to the carrier ranked #1 in network coverage and customer satisfaction and get unlimited everything for just $35 a month. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit Consumer Cellular online or in-store today. Price includes $5 credit for auto pay and e-billing. Taxes and fees apply. Data speeds reduced after 35 gigabytes. Rankings done by 2025 ACSI survey.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this hour of the Shaun Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
Sometimes when you talk about
And when the band plays
debt, people lose the perspective of the 30 trillion of the 39 trillion of debt. 30 trillion of it was added since Barack Obama was a state senator in Illinois. That is a staggering reality. That means in 18 years, this country has decided to add $30 trillion of debt, and we still pretend this isn't a fiscal emergency. It is. The problem is less than a third of Americans actually pay taxes. Out of that third, less than another third are actually the ones who bear the bulk of taxpayers. As we devolve into a Soviet system, it's time we understand we have to come together as a taxpayer union. I really think this is one of the most important organizations in existence. My next guest is a senior fellow for fiscal policy at the National Taxpayer Union and Taxpayer Union Foundation. Brittany, Madni, how are you?
Well, I'm doing a lot better than our federal budget is, I'll tell you that much.
Well, I got news for you. You could be working in a carnival, operating a merry-go-round and doing better than this, but it just keeps going round and around and around. And the reality is, I don't know who's more to blame, but everybody's to blame. But when you have 50% of the politicians calling themselves representation that do not care about $1 of the trillions of dollars that have been stolen from us, that seems to be where the focal point should be. And then we can include the other morons who are economic illiterates and happen to be calling themselves Republicans. But how could it be that every Democrat congressman, every Democrat senator could care less about the trillions of dollars that have been misappropriated and or stolen in benefits and entitlements?
Hey, that's an important question that every single American should be asking right now. Because don't forget, every dollar that the federal government is spending belongs to the taxpayer. It is not the government's money. It's your money. You worked hard for it. You earned it. The government stole it from you, and now they're spending it on things that are not your priorities. And that's really what this all comes down to. You mentioned at the top that we're $39 trillion in debt, and that's such important perspective because once you start getting into these trillions of dollars, it almost means nothing to people. But I did the math, and if you break that down by household in the U.S., it's about $289,000 in federal debt per household. So you're paying almost $300 in debt per household for the bad decisions that have been accumulating, to your point, since the Obama administration.
Well, one of the most fascinating and sickening realities is that I've done some math. When you add in what's called entitlements, but when you add in the entitlement sphere of America, you're at roughly $2.8 trillion. When you add in the costs of welfare in this country, and you include Medicare. When you put the cost of public education, and I say this to you, broadcasting from Chicago, which is the greatest example of a fraud education system, where society pays $33,000 per pupil. You have illegal aliens, you have kids that don't show up, but what you have is a true definition of failure, when 18 out of 100 can read, 13 out of 100 can do math. So that's $1 trillion in public education, $1 trillion. So you add all that up, you're just a hair under $4 trillion of what is called our national budget. and not the decent people haven't partaken in any of that. Think about that. And I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about it. The decent people are the ones that do not take the welfare of any kind. The decent people are the ones who say, I either am not sending my kids to that or I'm homeschooling my kids. So you cannot have more than 50% of the so-called budget go to 18% of the people and call it a country. I mean, this is 50% of the liability and the cost out the door, out of the window, and the vast majority of Americans aren't dipping their toe in any of it. That's a big problem, isn't it?
It's an absolutely massive problem. And to your point, that's what's driving our national debt, but it's also what's driving our national deficit. And that's kind of what I want to drill down on for a second here, because it's something that members of Congress, the federal government glosses over all the time. Everyone knows what debt is, right? It's what we're adding to our ever-growing tab that we're never paying. The deficit is how much we're spending over what we're taking in. And when we deficit spend, we're adding interest costs. Just like if you pay for your house with a loan or a mortgage and you have to pay interest on that, and those interest costs are high. So the exact same thing is happening with our debt and deficits. And so you have to really think about not only are these major programs like Medicaid and all these other welfare programs costing people, Americans who are working hard, an astronomical amount of money, but then on top of that, you have to pay the interest cost.
Well,
so it's a problem that's compounding on itself.
Well, it's even, and here's something I noticed years and years ago. And I noticed this because I remember when people were selling the .com nonsense. I remember when people were selling the mark-to-market math of Enron. And there's a flaw that we just tolerate, even though there are great entities and organizations that fight for financial solvency and the rest of it. The fraud really exists in the root of the math equation itself. When you take government spending and you count it as government revenue, you're perpetrating a financial crime, in my opinion, right? There's no such thing. Now, we can talk value. Value is different than math and integrity to math, right? And I used to have these arguments, by the way, in a fire department. So keep in mind that what I'm used to dealing with, okay? And I say this because some of my best friends and family members are firemen. And I would tell them, look, you guys are great. And let's use my friend because I like his name. Nobody can forget it. My friend, Mr. Budacek, best guy in the world. Run into the fire, first guy. You, Buddha, are value. You're value. I'll pay the $70,000 at the time you make, and that's value, and you never take it away. But at the same sense, when you're paid with tax dollars, you're a value, but you're never really going to be a financial asset because your entire economic life comes from taxes, tax costs. So in order to offset Buddha, what we used to do, it takes 30 taxpayers to offset the value of one good fireman. When you start counting them as taxpayers and revenue, you're perpetrating an Enron math scheme, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that you're hitting on a really important point here. And it's not just about the obvious fraud, right? Because I think that's something that gets confused a lot. How much fraud could there really be? First of all, there's a whole lot.
All of it.
Just look at Minnesota. Yeah. All of it. But then you have to go to this deeper layer. And that's something that we're working on at NTU. There's a concept that we're developing called legalized fraud. And one of the examples I can give you of that is where something is technically legal, but the average American would say, hold up, you got to be kidding me with this. So one example, we'll use welfare because, to your point, it's one of the most obvious places that people are abusing. If you are applying for food stamps, you would think that you actually have to go through a system and demonstrate your eligibility to be on food stamps. No, my friend.
You do not. No.
You do not. And as long as you live in a state, of which there are many, just look at your own, where you are eligible for almost any type of welfare, quote unquote, benefit, you can automatically get food stamps. Now, what qualifies as a benefit? Oh, well, if you want to walk into a local office that provides services like giving you brochures, just a simple brochure on where to access resources around the community, that is considered a welfare benefit that automatically gets you into the federal food stamp program. Now, that's just madness. And that's the kind of thing that we need to stop. That's called broad-based categorical eligibility, and it is totally legal right now.
Well, and there's 2 million people in Illinois on food stamps. 2 million people at a cost of $4.5 billion, or as I like to say, $4,500 million. And yet we have stores closing, grocery stores. And the reason, Brittany, is it's not being used to buy food. It's a fraud. They're selling it. 50 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar. It depends how bad your crack problem is at the moment, Brittany. The other problem you have is that you have a mayor in Brandon Johnson who's an economic illiterate and a Marxist fraud who has hired 9,000 foot soldiers in new positions, new employees of the city of Chicago, just the city, 9,000. And they're counting tax revenue as revenue. They're counting debt as revenue. It's a financial crime, and who's going to talk about it, Brittany? There's about 6 people in the entire Chicago public school system that could follow this conversation we're having. So you got a real problem of stupid on stupid, or as I like to call it, ghettonomics. Feel free to start using that term, will you please, Brittany, at the National Taxpayer Union Foundation? That's where government creates debt and employment and calls it revenue, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're making an apt point here. You can't count deficit spending as something other than what it is, which is a future tax on taxpayers. And that's the exact same thing that you're describing on a local level there in Chicago. If you're putting yourself into a position where the city's revenues, the state's revenues, federal revenues are being counted as something that they're not, you're not only perpetuating the problem, you're lying to the citizenry.
or as it's known in Chicago, talking. The other thing you have to keep in mind, right? We have a bunch of these commies now, these socialist Marxist commies, right? They're politicians. I don't know how much you know about Illinois politics, but it's fascinating. And you should study it because New York invented political corruption, New Jersey perfected it, but Chicago made it an art form. So all of the people in Washington, all of the people who are fighting, you should study just what happens in Chicago and Illinois. We've got an ex-governor, not one of the ones that went to jail. He's one of the few recent ones that hasn't gone to jail. And the reason is I think people feel sorry for him. His face should be used on lead-based paint disclosures. He's called Pat Quinn, or I call him Paint Chips Pat Quinn. Him and a swindler by the name of Shaun Ford, who was originally indicted on 17 counts of bank fraud, and then pled guilty to 1, and they let it kind of go because, in my opinion, in my neighborhood, that's called you agree to become a confidential informant, but that's not been proven yet. However, they're talking about taxing the rich. Tax the rich, tax the rich. In Illinois, they do not tax pensions, and the reason is the vast majority of the people who stay and who make up Illinois are municipal government workers on pensions, so they don't tax them. But they're the real rich, because they retire with these phony agreements called pensions, but they just use that word. They're employment agreements. See, the way you receive government pensions in Illinois, you're not bound on return of investment. They don't even know what that is. ROI, schmaroi. They could care less what that is. They get a percentage of their last municipal paycheck, teacher union check, whatever it is, and it compounds 3% annually. So you get compound interest, the magic of compound interest, which is fantastic because that means in 12 years, they're making over 100% of what they made their last year, and they don't pay taxes on it. So that's not really taxing the rich. That's not socialism or Marxism. That's just carving out your friends and keeping the scam going, isn't it?
I mean, are we surprised by this, though? It's been pretty clear that that's the game this whole time. It's rigged. It's rigged, and that's why people are so frustrated. And then you turn around and you watch Congress just pass a budget resolution this week that would allow for spending another $135 billion. Now, here's the thing. I'm not against spending money to secure our elections. I think it's important that we do that. My issue is that's a priority. We should pay for it by cutting things that aren't priorities. Cut the welfare spending, do the reforms to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, so that we can pay for things that actually are important, like election security.
So I've done the math, and we have to be careful, right? Because sometimes I notice this during the Milton Friedman years and the push for laissez-faire capitalism. I noticed the bastardization of the principle. First of all, I love Milton Friedman. Who doesn't love him? Doesn't he look like a guy you'd love to have a dinner with or smoke a cigar with or talk to? And he's such a pure capitalist. However, you can never forget, he's also the guy who helped the government take the taxes right out of the payroll tax. He's the architect of the payroll tax after World War II. Mm-hmm. So you got to be careful in all of this laissez-faire talk. But when we talk about government spending, you have to break it down, right? So you've got just under $4 trillion when you add entitlements in public education. Then you add the interest payments, another $1 trillion, right? So that's $5 trillion. Then you add the defense. That's another $1 trillion. So that's $6 trillion. So in all of this this nervousness, and it is nervousness, right? Donald Trump signs a new thing, $7 trillion. Well, 6 of it's on autopilot. And then you look at how these scoundrels pass bills. They've got that same kicker that pensions have. They got a 3% kicker in perpetuity forever, which means every 12 years, you're guaranteed to spend more than you ever spent before. That's how you get to $30 trillion in 18 years, and it seems normal. And then there's only me and you and a couple of people who belong in our fans and our listeners and part of the National Taxpayer Union. And we start to forget about the fraud that was in that. And in order to combat it, what's the best way to do it? Well, the best way to do it is break apart what it's built on, which is why you and me and everybody at the National Taxpayer Unions should start a class action suit and take away the first communist measure this country took. I don't want your Social Security. You don't owe me anything. Give me my money back. You don't owe me anything. I don't want your frickin' payments. Don't come to me if you're 62 or 65 or 71. Get the hell out of here. Give me every dollar I paid. You don't owe me anything. Don't we have to attack it the way it was put in?
I mean, the first thing that we have to do is to educate the population, right? Because they've been lied to for decades on this. I can't tell you how many times I've had to talk to my grandmother, who's a massive conservative, by the way, that, Grammy, no, there's not a lockbox with your name and Social Security number on it somewhere in a building in D.C. That's not true. That's not how it works. And so really undoing the lies that have been sold to the American people is the first step. So that is one of the things that we're working on at NTU, is really trying to educate not only the taxpayers, but the members of Congress that are supposed to be representing them. Because there are some good members who are trying to do the right thing, but they don't know some of the depth of the problem either. So we really are trying to put out information that makes it extraordinarily clear just how deeply the scheme runs.
Now, Brittany, Madni, I don't want you to think I'm somebody that graduated cum laude. I'm a meathead. I'm a moron, but I am a capitalist. And I want to let you know what inspired me to become interested in all of this. When you never work for anybody and you only work for yourself, or you grew up in a family that did, you watch the angst and the anxiety of people who may have left school when they were in high school or grade school. You may understand because you watch them struggle. Those are the few Americans that sit down and pay taxes. See, my friend Milton Friedman, he made it possible for Americans to be this stupid because of payroll taxes. And if we're not going to attack, which we should absolutely, Social Security and the fraud, scoundrel, scam, Ponzi scheme it is, at least make Americans sit down every quarter with their accountant and pay taxes. We must immediately fight the unconstitutional reality that nullifies the intellect of the American in payroll taxes. It must stop. It was temporary after World War II, and the only thing that allows people to be this stupid is they get used to being a slave, and they get used to living on, if they're lucky, 60% of what they make, 50% if they're real good at making money. Break the extortion of allowing a government, both state and local, to steal the working man's money and let him understand what his real value is by giving him his payroll 100%, and now sit down and pay taxes every quarter. Everybody will be better off. Most of all, the actual employed American, don't you think?
Something you just said really struck a nerve with me, and that this was supposed to be temporary. You're right. It was supposed to be temporary. Wasn't it our good friend Ronald Reagan who said there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program?
Right.
And I think that's another problem we're looking at when it comes to federal spending. The vast majority of the federal budget is on autopilot. That means that Congress does not actually vote on most dollars going out the door every year. Most of the money going out the door, and I'm not even talking about interest, which is also part of the problem and also doesn't get voted on, of course.
Yeah.
Most of the spending from the federal government does not get voted on year after year. They pass it once and it's there in perpetuity. And that's what's happened with Social Security. That's what happened with Medicare. That's what happened with Medicaid. That's what happened with food stamps, with so many of these programs. When that happens, yeah, of course there's going to be rampant fraud. But not only that, you're going to just continuously increase the government spending of your hard-earned money without thinking about it, without even taking a look to see, hey, should we even still be doing this program? Does it make sense? Is it a problem? Is a post-World War II measure that was supposed to be temporary to make sure that we were able to survive after this massive, massive drain on resources, including human lives of Americans from the greatest generation. Are we still in an environment where all of those measures are necessary? Were they the right thing to do when we set these things up as a pilot program to begin with? Maybe not. Maybe it's time to revisit that instead of just continuing to operate on autopilot and pretend like nothing matters. Because, of course, it's easy to spend the money when it's not yours.
Well, we're so unmoored from financial reality and financial responsibility. Most Americans have no idea that payroll taxes out of your check were temporary. I guarantee you, you put 10 kids in a room. Kids, and when I say kids, I'm talking 16 to 40. Put 10 in a room. How many know that your payroll tax was supposed to be temporary? And there is no such thing as a tax refund. That's a confession by the government that they stole more of your paycheck than they were even entitled to. But if you use and misuse and bastardize language, before you know it, you'll get people thinking that $1 trillion a year on interest on a portion of it that was created buyers is normal. This is the other thing I hate, Brittany. The idea that you create a buyer for a bond, you call it monetized debt. You just have two morons or morons put two words together and everyone stops asking questions. So if there was no buyer and they bought a bond and it's paying interest, who gets the money? Ask those same kids in a room what that is. Where's the money go? And why am I paying interest on it? Oh, boy, Brittany, we could change the world if you would just let me take total control of the National Taxpayer Union and we run it the way my ancestors ran Norway. Could we do it again? We come back with the Vikings and the Axis and we get our money back. What do you say, Brittany?
Hey, my biggest concern right now is that our republic is starting to look awfully attractive to old Mad King George III. And if that's the case and that's the direction we're going, then it's time to take a giant series of steps backwards.
She is a senior fellow at the National Taxpayer Union. You can find her at ntu.org. Brittany, Madni, you thank everybody there for what you do, because this is crucially important that we make people understand you're the taxpayer. And at the National Taxpayer Union, there are no dues. There are just principles. Feel free to put that on a shirt.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be back with your calls and comments.
Call Shaun now. 312-642-5600.
Making the switch to a new communications and IT company may seem like a big ordeal, but if you're not getting the reliable support, consistent internet, and secure solutions your company needs, meet Access One, your local Chicagoland IT experts. Access One has been powering Chicago businesses with secure, reliable IT solutions for over 30 years from our headquarters right here in the West Loop. Whether it's VoIP phones, dedicated internet, managed cybersecurity,